time for money, power, politics. Contrary to what the president claims, grocery prices are on the rise.
I can make anybody do anything through the use of tariffs.
Clearly, Trump's focus has shifted from Iran to Europe. Europe's leading economies are bracing for his tariff attack, but the real impact is showing in America, at the checkout counters and on grocery bills. Because it's Americans who are paying the price of Trump's tariffs. A German think tank has crunched the data and the numbers speak for themselves. Businesses did not cut prices in response to U.S. tariffs. They just passed on the added cost.
Challenges are rising for American families struggling to pay for 3 square meals a day. The latest numbers show there is no relief from inflation on essential groceries. The price of ground beef, steaks, getting hit the hardest.
Happening now. Food prices across the United States are climbing at a pace many households say they have never experienced before, and beef has become one of the clearest symbols of this shift. In grocery stores from coast to coast, shoppers are pausing longer at the meat section, checking prices twice, and in many cases walking away without buying. Recent data shows beef prices have risen sharply compared to previous years, driven by a mix of supply pressure, higher production costs, and changes in global demand. Beef production has been under strain for some time. Drought conditions in major cattle-raising regions reduced pasture quality and increased feed costs. Ranchers faced tough decisions, including reducing herd sizes to manage expenses. With fewer cattle available, supply tightened. At the same time, costs for fuel, transportation, and labor increased, pushing prices higher before the beef even reached processing plants. Processing itself has also faced challenges. Labor shortages at meatpacking facilities slowed operations, while stricter safety and health requirements raised overhead costs. These expenses did not disappear. They moved down the supply chain and eventually reached consumers. Analysts warn that when multiple cost pressures stack up at once, prices tend to rise faster than incomes. At the retail level, beef has become noticeably less affordable. Ground beef, once considered a budget-friendly option, now competes with higher-priced alternatives. Steaks and roasts are increasingly seen as luxury purchases, rather than everyday items. Families adjusting grocery budgets report shifting toward chicken, eggs, beans, or plant-based proteins to manage weekly expenses. Inflation across the broader food system adds to the problem. Packaging materials, refrigeration, and store operations all cost more than they did a few years ago. Even when beef prices stabilize at the wholesale level, these added expenses can keep shelf prices high. This could mean relief for consumers may come slower than expected. Global factors also play a role. Beef is not just a domestic product. It is part of an international market. When demand rises in other regions, exporters respond. Reduced availability at home can follow, even if domestic production remains steady. Analysts warn that in a globalized food system, local affordability is influenced by distant markets. As prices rise in the United States, attention is turning outward. Across parts of Africa, observers are closely watching these developments. Some African countries are both importers and emerging producers of beef. High prices in wealthier nations highlight how food affordability can shift rapidly, even in economies long considered stable. For African consumers, the situation in the United States is a reminder of vulnerability. Many households across the continent already spend a large share of income on food. Seeing beef become unaffordable in a major economy raises questions about resilience and equity in the global food system. This could mean renewed focus on local production and diversified diets. At the same time, some African producers may see opportunity. If global beef prices remain high, exporting becomes more attractive investment. In livestock, cold storage and transport infrastructure could increase. However, analysts warn that export growth must be balanced with domestic needs to avoid pushing local prices beyond reach. The contrast is striking. In the United States, consumers accustomed to abundant choice are now adjusting expectations. In Africa, where food security has long been a concern, the situation reinforces existing lessons about self-reliance and adaptability. This could mean shared challenges but very different starting points. Nutrition experts caution that reduced beef consumption has mixed implications. On one hand, diversifying protein sources can be healthy and environmentally beneficial. On the other, sudden dietary shifts driven by cost rather than choice can strain households, especially those relying on beef as a primary protein source. The ripple effects extend beyond dinner tables. Restaurants face higher menu costs, forcing them to raise prices or reduce portion sizes. Some have removed beef dishes altogether or limited availability to certain days. This impacts employment, supplier contracts, and local economies tied to food service. Rural communities connected to cattle ranching feel a different kind of pressure, while higher prices can mean better margins, reduced herd sizes, and higher input costs. Offset gains. Uncertainty makes long-term planning difficult. This could mean volatility rather than stability for producers. Trade relationships are also affected. When domestic prices rise, policymakers face pressure to protect consumers, sometimes by adjusting import or export policies. Any change in trade flows can influence global prices, affecting countries far beyond U.S. borders. Analysts warn that reactive policies can amplify volatility if not carefully coordinated. Climate considerations loom large in this story. Beef production is resource-intensive, requiring land, water, and feed. Extreme weather events disrupt each of these inputs. As climate patterns become less predictable, price swings may become more frequent. This could mean higher risk for both producers and consumers. Technology offers partial solutions. Improved breeding, feed efficiency, and supply chain tracking can reduce costs over time. However, these innovations require investment and time to scale. Short-term relief remains limited. Public response continues to evolve. Social media discussions show frustration, concern, and adaptation. Some consumers share tips on budgeting and alternative meals. Others question the sustainability of current food systems. Analysts warn that prolonged pressure on food affordability can influence social attitudes and policy priorities. From a global perspective, the situation highlights interconnectedness. A drought, a fuel price spike, or a labor shortage in one region can affect dinner plates thousands of miles away. Africa, watching the United States struggle with beef prices, underscores that no system is immune. Long-term solutions point toward resilience. Diversified agriculture, regional supply chains, and fair trade practices can reduce shock. Education about nutrition and alternative proteins can help households adapt without sacrificing health. This could mean turning a challenge into an opportunity for reform. As prices remain high and adjustments continue, uncertainty persists. Will beef return to being an everyday option for most households, or will it remain a symbol of changing times? Will rising prices accelerate shifts toward new food systems globally? As you think about these developments, one question stands out. In a world where even wealthy nations face food affordability challenges, how can global cooperation ensure that basic nutrition remains within reach for everyone? The pressure on household budgets continues to grow, and beef remains at the center of the conversation. Many families across the United States now plan meals around price tags rather than preferences. Shopping habits are changing in visible ways. Smaller packages are chosen, bulk purchases are avoided, and discounts are followed closely. For some households, beef is no longer a weekly staple but an occasional item reserved for special moments. This shift is changing how people think about food security. In the past, food insecurity was often discussed as a problem affecting other regions. Now it is becoming a daily concern in communities that once felt insulated from such worries. Analysts warn that when food prices rise faster than wages, stress builds quietly but steadily, affecting mental health, family stability, and long-term well-being. The agricultural system itself is under growing strain. Farmers and ranchers are facing higher borrowing costs as interest rates rise. Equipment, veterinary care, and feed prices all demand more capital. Even when beef sells at higher prices, profit margins remain tight because expenses climb at the same time. This could mean fewer small producers survive, leading to greater consolidation in the industry. Consolidation brings its own risks when fewer companies control more of the supply chain. Disruptions can have wider effects. A single processing delay or transportation issue can ripple across regions. Consumers may see sudden shortages or rapid price jumps without warning. Analysts warn that resilience decreases when diversity in production and distribution declines. International markets continue to respond to these signals. Countries that import beef from the United States must decide whether to absorb higher costs or seek alternatives. Some are turning to suppliers in South America, Australia, or parts of Africa. This could mean new trade routes forming while older ones weaken. For African nations, this moment is both a warning and an opportunity. The warning lies in seeing how quickly affordability can disappear, even in a strong economy. The opportunity lies in investment and strategy. Building local supply chains, improving animal health, and expanding cold storage can help stabilize prices and support rural livelihoods. Analysts warn, however, that rapid expansion without safeguards can strain land and water resources. Urban consumers in Africa watch global food news closely. Rising international prices can influence local markets through imports and speculation. Even if beef is produced locally, global trends shape expectations and pricing. This could mean that what happens in U.S. grocery stores today may influence African markets tomorrow. The cultural role of beef is also evolving in the United States. beef has long been tied to tradition, celebrations, and identity. As affordability declines, these traditions may shift. Alternative proteins are entering mainstream conversations not only for environmental reasons but for economic survival. This could mean long-term changes in national diets. Restaurants are adapting creatively. Some highlight smaller portions with higher quality cuts, while others feature beef as an occasional special rather than a menu staple. Chefs speak about educating customers on new flavors and preparations. Analysts warn that adaptation is necessary, but it cannot fully shield businesses from reduced demand. Supply chain transparency is gaining attention. Consumers want to know why prices are high and where costs originate. Technology that tracks food from farm to store is expanding, offering insight but also revealing inefficiencies. This could mean pressure on companies to justify pricing decisions more clearly. Public policy debates are intensifying. Discussions about subsidies, drought relief, and food assistance programs are growing louder. When basic food items become less affordable, governments face pressure to respond. Analysts warn that short-term fixes may ease symptoms but not address structural issues like climate risk and market concentration. Climate remains a central factor. Heat waves, unpredictable rainfall, and extreme storms affect cattle health and feed availability. Adaptation strategies such as drought-resistant forage and improved water management are advancing, but scaling them takes time. This could mean price volatility becomes a recurring feature rather than a temporary phase. The human impact is visible in everyday choices. Parents adjust meals to stretch budgets, seniors on fixed incomes cut back on protein. Food banks report increased demand, even among households that previously donated. Analysts warn that when food assistance demand rises alongside inflation, social systems are tested. Education around nutrition becomes critical. Replacing beef with other proteins requires knowledge to maintain balanced diets. Community programs and online resources play a role in guiding healthier, affordable choices. This could mean improved food literacy becomes as important as income support. Global comparisons continue to draw attention. Observers in Africa note that while beef prices rise in the United States, many African communities have long navigated scarcity with resilience and adaptation. Traditional diets relying on diverse grains, legumes, and vegetables offer lessons. This could mean a two-way exchange of ideas. Rather than a one-sided narrative, economic inequality sharpens the impact. Higher-income households absorb price increases with relative ease, while lower-income families feel immediate strain. Analysts warn that unequal access to nutritious food can widen health gaps over time, increasing long-term healthcare costs and reducing productivity. Technology-driven alternatives, such as lab-grown meat or plant-based substitutes, gain attention as prices rise. While still costly for many consumers, investment continues. This could mean future competition that reshapes the protein market entirely, though timelines remain uncertain. Building buffers through storage, diversification, and regional cooperation becomes essential. This could mean stronger South-South trade relationships and reduced dependence on distant markets. In the United States, the story continues to unfold. Whether prices stabilize or climb further will depend on weather patterns, global demand, and policy choices. Analysts warn that ignoring underlying pressures could lead to repeated shocks rather than recovery. As beef remains out of reach for many and global attention stays fixed on food systems, the broader question grows louder. In a world facing climate change, economic uncertainty, and interconnected markets, how can nations work together to ensure that affordable, nutritious food is not a privilege, but a shared foundation for stability?